Hey everyone, thanks so much for being here with me. If you know me, you know that I hate being perceived, so it's taken me a long time to finally make this YouTube channel. But I'm doing this because I want to share in the wonder of the incredible ecology that we have here in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest. I also want to set the record straight about what's really affecting salmon and orcas in our area because I am just really tired of the misinformation from Seattle NIMBYs who make up excuses about salmon and orca to try to keep new neighbors away. I also feel like accurate and up-to-date information about our local ecology and salmon and orcas is somewhat gatekept. For example, you might have to go to seminars in the middle of the day, or you might have to get a whole degree or commit to a program that takes up a lot of your time. And that's just not fair. I want people to be able to learn these things from the comfort of their home on their own time and to the level that is comfortable for them. And I really think that if we want to build an equitable and sustainable city, we have to not only understand the zoning and the building forms and the design review processes, but we also really have to get to know the local ecology. And I'm an urbanist who loves city living, the diversity, food, culture, walkability. I'm also obsessed with nature. And as it turns out, being an urbanist and a nature lover go hand in hand. That's because what's good for salmon and orcas and the wildlife is good for cities and for people. And we can build better cities that work for both salmon and people, even as we grow our urban populations. But I've been feeling like our narratives and understanding about urban ecology have been stuck for a while here in Seattle. On one hand, there are NIMBYs who say that we have to preserve our mature urban tree canopy at all costs to save salmon and orcas. And new programs are being set up by these NIMBYs to pay homeowners, aka themselves, to preserve single trees in their private backyards. Then, on the other hand, you have urbanists who argue back that we have to build much more housing inside existing cities to prevent sprawl, which then prevents even more mature trees from being cut down in intact natural areas outside of the city. And both sides keep repeating the platitude that we can have both housing and trees. And to be very clear, the urbanists who want more housing inside existing cities are absolutely right. And building more housing inside existing cities is one of the single most important things that we can do for the environment, for salmon and for orca, and to slow climate change. But there's just so much missing from this conversation. It's not simply a matter of denser urban infill housing versus more spread out and sprawling suburban and exurban development. Though, again, I will emphasize that denser urban infill housing is definitely better. It's really a matter of reimagining our cities completely with nature in mind, restoring our urban ecosystems, and undoing our past and present mistakes. The past and present mistakes we've made in trying to conquer and contain our waterways, rivers, lakes, wetlands, and floodplains, rather than celebrating them as they are and giving them space to simply exist. The past and present mistakes we've made in fragmenting our natural habitats and then doubling down to preserve these degraded and disconnected patches of private backyards, rather than creating large, healthy, contiguous, publicly managed, restored, and accessible green spaces. The past and present mistakes we've made in creating car-centric and car-dependent cities that force us to live far away from work, food, fun, and each other, that force us to pave over green space for giant parking lots, that force us to pollute the environment, emit carbon, and shed tire pollution into the water anytime we need to go anywhere, whether that's just the grocery store or work. All of this rather than simply building walkable and bikeable communities served well by public transit. And I'm not just talking about suburbs or exurbs here. I'm talking about the car dependence right here inside our dense cities, where many of our sprawling urban residential neighborhoods lack sidewalks and bike lanes, and much of the zoning doesn't even allow cafes or grocery stores. It's these water-conquering, habitat-fragmenting, and car-favoring development patterns and all of the many decisions we make to uphold them that hurt our climate, our environment, and of course, our salmon. The preservation of sprawling urban neighborhoods, parking, and lone isolated trees surrounded by invasive lawn grass in private backyards over the building of more walkable communities and restoration of contiguous urban ecosystems holds us back from creating the sustainable and vibrant cities that we deserve. But luckily, what's good for us is good for salmon. We can create thriving urban ecosystems accessible to all life, whether human, plant, or animal. Rather than having our rivers run through private backyards full of invasive plants, and even homes when it rains too hard, we can turn our floodplains into lush, floodable parks full of contiguous native plant habitat that salmon love. We can build dense, affordable, park-oriented housing above the floodplain just outside of these parks. Imagine anyone can come visit the river, and every single family living there can have a view of the plants and water. Until the trees get too big, of course. Speaking of views, rather than having our collective water views hidden from us by giant mansions and their associated hedges and fences, let's instead turn the shorelines along Lake Washington and Puget Sound into parks too. Private ownership and development of any waterfront anywhere is absolutely immoral, but especially in critical salmon habitat all along these shores. Waterfronts belong to us all and to the baby salmon. We must turn them into restored public green spaces. And rather than desperately holding onto fragmented private backyards with a couple of lonely trees surrounded by invasive lawn grass, let's buy up a few lots like these in every neighborhood, turn them into pocket parks, and plant them fuller and fuller with native plants every year. Let's do this in neighborhoods with the fewest trees first. Let's make sure to surround these pocket parks with dense apartments and social housing, and let's make sure that every single unit has a view of the park out their window. While we're at it, let's please also make sure that these pocket parks aren't just full of invasive lawn grass everywhere. Though, of course, some space for doggies and kiddos to run around is, of course, needed. And rather than forcing everyone to drive everywhere, let's build thriving walkable communities that aren't cut up by noisy, polluted highways where you have to risk your life to simply cross the street. And rather than stuffing our roads full of on-street parking and maintaining giant off-street parking lots and garages everywhere, let's make more room for street trees and turn giant parking lots into, you guessed it, public parks. The great thing about reimagining our cities this way, with huge and continuous floodplain parks, shoreline parks, pocket parks, street trees, parking lot parks, is that it doesn't require excluding any new neighbors or preventing new urban infill housing. Just the opposite, in fact. New neighbors will help create the tax base, development opportunities, and volunteer labor to execute these plans. After all, a thriving pocket park full of trees or a lush floodplain park full of salmon won't care if it's next to social housing or a mansion. But many more people, especially those who need it, can enjoy and care for it if it's social housing instead. And by the way, these are not new ideas. Many cities around the world have been implementing them for a long time. Sometimes you'll hear them under the terms sponge cities or blue-green infrastructure, for example. So the time is now. Let's end this era of water-conquering, habitat fragmenting, and car-favoring urban development and turn Seattle into a thriving, walkable metropolitan city where people and salmon have all the access to beautiful parks and water that they could ever want. With that, like, subscribe, and whatever else I'm supposed to say here so that you can see all my upcoming videos. I have a 5-part series in the works right now explaining the reasons behind salmon population declines in the Pacific Northwest, and I will release the first intro video of that series together with this one, so you can already be watching that. I'm also going to be making some fun vlogs where I'll be taking transit to cool places with salmon to see or cool nature to experience. And I promise that those other videos aren't going to be as long or boring as this. So thanks everyone.